With the NBA draft just days away and all eyes in Philadelphia on this upcoming draft with the number 3 overall pick and the number 35 overall pick, the 76ers have the opportunity to get two potential young players that could help in this rotation as soon as next year in what is looking like a wide open Eastern Conference. If you want to talk big picture things to start off this video, you look at what happened last night with the Indiana Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton tearing his Achilles and, 95% likely that he will be out for the entire season next year. Jason Tatum, just a few weeks removed from a torn Achilles of his own. The Celtics are sure to take a step back. Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis potentially heading out, with Damian Lillard with a torn Achilles as well, most likely to miss the entire season. You look at the Sixers; their biggest competitors probably are the New York Knicks and the Orlando Magic. I would think when you look at the Sixers roster and when they're fully healthy, and that's a big when. The Sixers are still going to be a major if team, where you're going to throw the word if in there, basically talking about any possible scenario for the Sixers. But if Joel Embiid is healthy and if that team is finally able to be put together the way that Daryl Morey has envisioned it, has wanted to build it, and then hopefully with some luck here with the number 3 and 35 overall pick hitting, that's a team that on paper is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and potentially the best opportunity that this Sixers kind of era has at making a finals and, potentially winning one. So when you look at the number 3 and number 35 overall pick, it is very important that the Sixers hit on these draft picks. I think there's a chance that they might even look to get another player potentially in this draft, trade a future asset to move back into this draft, because I think that they're really going to try and capitalize on this window and on this potential season. And there's a lot of pressure on both Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse. But when you look at Daryl Morey, heading into this offseason, he's stated numerous times the goal is to get younger and the goal is to get more athletic. And right now, the 76ers are heavily rumored. You even look on the betting markets, it sounds like more and more as each day, as each second, each minute, whatever you want to say, goes by, that VJ Edgecombe will be the pick at number 3. And it makes sense because that fits the description of what Daryl Morey said. Wanted to get younger, wanted to get more athletic, and VJ Edgecombe, by all accounts, is the most athletic player in the entire draft. Not just at his position, not that's just going to be available when the Sixers are on the clock. In the entire draft, the Sixers have the chance to get the best athlete. And I think, he kind of vaults himself into the conversation there in the NBA as one of the top 10 to 15 athletes, most likely, from day one. And when you look at the Sixers, I don't think we can really look at this roster and say, over the past decade or so that we've had one of the most 10 to 15 athletic players on this roster at any point. You look at last year's team, like Justin Edwards, maybe your best athlete on that team, Tyrese Maxey, if you want to throw him in to the mix there, Ricky Council, but this is a player that has a star potential, but also a super athlete. But as well, with the number 35 pick, the Sixers have a chance to get another young, up and coming player, an athletic player. So I just wanted to kind of dumb it down, make it a little simple, and be like, all right, here's 3 targets that the Sixers could potentially look if they do want to get more athletic. I gave a big man, I gave like a forward, and then I gave a wing guard type of option as well. I'm going to go into a scouting report a little bit on each of those guys as we try to get more younger and more athletic. The Sixers, I think I've said it in multiple videos, obviously hitting on number 3 is very important, but hitting on number 35 is not equally as important, but just like a little bit below, because I think it's very pivotal when you look at a team like the Pacers or like the Thunder. They've hit on these draft picks and these low kind of, price picks, these low price players that are able to go in there and fill minutes in the rotation. And that's what the Sixers need. And if they're looking to get younger and more athletic, nailing that number 35 pick is going to be key. So let's just say for the time being, for all reports sakes that we've heard, VJ Edgecombe, it sounds like will be the pick there, and that solves a lot of your athleticism issues right off the bat. But let's go to the number 35 pick and some players that could potentially be in the mix. And we'll start in the in the backcourt with Drake Powell out of North Carolina. This is a player, a one-and-done guy out of UNC, a former highly touted recruit. We talked about him in a video last week as the Sixers were tied to him in some mock drafts. But his range is kind of that 25-ish. I've seen him go as high as about pick 40. Has a little bit of a big range, but he definitely could be on the board for the Sixers here at number 35. I was actually listening to a mock draft today on CBS Sports. They had him going number 29 overall, I believe it was, to the Phoenix Suns. But Adam Finkelstein, shout out to him, like one of the more well-respected scouts kind of in the media, and Kyle Boone, they were doing the mock draft going back and forth, and Kyle Boone from CBS Sports says, shades of Jaylen Brown. And obviously he makes the statement in there that, all player comparisons aren't exactly par for par, but he sees shades of Jaylen Brown in his game, and you kind of look at the physical description: 6'6", about 200 pounds. He fits that hyper athletic, strong kind of 3-and-D type of wing potentially in the future if all pans out. You look at the numbers here, not super eye popping: 7.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, shot about 38% from three, which is intriguing. But I think he's a player that his best basketball is certainly ahead of him, but a fun athletic guy that you could definitely get in the mix as well. I think he's a perfect type of player to spell, a Justin Edwards, spell a Kelly Oubre, spell a Paul George in spurts coming off the bench, provide defense, provide athleticism as he tries to, continue to refine his offensive game. So Drake Powell's a name that I've seen tied to the Sixers, but also, a hyper athletic guard that kind of fits kind of the mold of this story, of this video that we're trying to put out here for you guys right now to give you a better understanding of maybe some of these guys that the Sixers could be looking to target. So Drake Powell out of North Carolina, I think certainly is guy, if he's on the board, will be in the back of the mind of Daryl Morey in the Sixers front office. And I could definitely see him playing in Philadelphia next year. One of your kind of rotation guard wings off the bench, behind Justin Edwards, Kelly Oubre. We'll see what Lonnie Walker, if they bring him back. But I could see a role for Drake Powell as soon as next year with the Philadelphia 76ers. Next guy I want to touch on, another player that we've touched on in some videos before, a guy I might be a little bit higher on than most, but I've seen the development and the, just becoming a man, essentially, from a skinny senior in high school to like who was pretty under recruited, to now being built like an NFL edge rusher. That's what kind of Adou Thiero looks like here out of Arkansas. Starts his career at the University of Kentucky, plays there for 2 years, transfers to Arkansas when Coach Cal leaves. But he's a player that has gradually improved, and I think his best basketball is ahead of him as well. But he's got an NBA body and an NBA athleticism from day one. You look at it, the three-point shooting, definitely a work in progress. He's not a player that you're going to say, go sit in the corner and knock down threes, or go get us a bucket. He's a player that's going to be physical, defend, he's going to rebound, and he's going to be a force in transition as well, and fits, once again, going back to that athleticism thing. And he's a player where I think he's so strong and has such, athletic tools, athletic gifts, that like he could play small ball four here, even sitting there at 6'6". But like I said, average 15.1 points per game this year, has taken a huge leap over the past few seasons. I think the best basketball ahead is ahead for Adou Thiero, and is a guy that I would love in the mix for Philadelphia. I think another player kind of has that same draft range as Drake Powell, that he could be 25 to 45. It wouldn't surprise me after you get past the top. The lottery, essentially, it's a lot of it's kind of beauty in the eye of the beholder. A lot more of a range than the NFL draft, I think, where a lot of those players are consensus like top 50 guys. There's some guys that'll be in mock drafts in the first round, and they'll potentially go undrafted. You can point to Philadelphia with Justin Edwards even just last year. But Adou Thiero, I think his best basketball is ahead of him, and he's got that NBA frame and NBA athleticism that helps him from day one to get on the court. I think he's got a really bright future, and I think he's even going to get bigger and stronger potentially. Does that impact his speed, his athleticism? I'm not sure, but he's a rare type of athlete that I think would be a welcomed presence for the Philadelphia 76ers next season. And our last guy that we're going to touch on, a big man, and I'll be fully transparent here. Sorry about that one. It's a player that I hadn't even heard of until kind of the combine, and I like to think I pay attention to a good amount of Big Ten basketball, and this is a player that I didn't really hear much of this season. Yannick Conan Niederhauser, had to look up the pronunciation for that before, but had a really strong second half to this season. Kind of is the consensus for him at Penn State, and he's a transfer. He transferred up from the MAC, playing at Northern Illinois over the previous season, and he had a nice second half of the year. Kind of started to get on the radar of some NBA teams, some NBA scouts, and then had a really good combine. Was arguably the highest riser of the combine. And Penn State probably wasn't counting for him to even get sniffed to leave and go test the NBA draft waters, but here they are now without him in the lineup after that great combine. He's your prototypical kind of rim running big, with the ability to go out and defend on the perimeter, the athleticism there. You look up kind of his description, You look up a little stuff about him. He's got the good fluid kind of footwork, the movement ability, the ability to flip his hips and run with a guy. I think he'll be able to guard guys in ball screens, but he also on the offensive end rim runs. Is efficient around the hoop, 61.1% this year. Doesn't have much of an outside game, but in the Big Ten this year, averaged about 13 points and 6 rebounds per game. I think he's going to be a good shot blocker. But it's a player that has been in the mix for this kind of draft range. I think he kind of fits back to the Thiero and Powell as well, kind of that late first to middle of the second range. But I don't know necessarily, the benefit of taking him, but he is probably the best athlete of the centers at this stage, because I would say, a guy like Kalkbrenner, a guy like Renaud or Maxine Reynaud from Stanford. These players are not nearly the athlete that Yannick is. But at the same time, I don't know the benefit really of taking him for the Sixers if they do believe in a Dembona. I think those two are a little bit too similar. Yannick may be a little bit more of a higher upside and potentially, just raw talent. I think he still has some more to grow into and maybe just a little bit more physically gifted, a little taller. But I think those two are very similar players, and it would be, kind of counterintuitive to have two of the same kind of backup big men. We've talked about it with the other bigs. Like I would more so welcome in a guy like Reynaud just because of his, diverse offensive skill set compared to a guy like Bona who's continuing to develop that side. But Yannick is a very athletic center, and I just kind of wanted to touch on him, and because I've seen him tied to a lot of mock drafts with the Philadelphia 76ers as well. So three athletes here, and Yannick, Kanin Niederhauser, Drake Powell, and Adou Thiero, that all I've seen mocked to the Philadelphia 76ers in one way or another. Just one more quick look here at Yannick and what he did this past year at Penn State. But it is a situation where I think the 76ers have put that out there that they want to get younger, they want to get more athletic, and they have the opportunity to do so. And they're going to look at those athletic scores. VJ Edgecombe popping off the page as an athlete, and potentially get a guy like Thiero, get a guy like Powell, get a guy like Niederhauser there with your first pick in the second round, and maybe even look to move back into the second round or even the late first. And give up a future asset if you have a guy that you really like and you think is a superb athlete that could kind of fit into the rotation. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We are just hours away basically at this point. We're almost there. We'll have an instant reaction video as soon as the 76ers make that pick at number 3. Hopefully they're not trading back and they're making the pick. And then another video most likely at the end of the night with some guys that are still on the board as we head into the second round. So we're going to have plenty of coverage coming up over the next few days. But as always, please drop a like. Please drop a subscribe. We'll talk to you next time here on Sixers Digest.